All right. Hi, Peter. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview with me, where we're going to be focusing around the subject of retention. But before we get started with a few questions that I've got for you, would you be able to please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself so that people can understand who you are and what you know and what you've done, please?
Sure. Thanks, Emma, for having me today. So my name is Peter Lempris. I'm a senior HR executive. I've lived and worked on 3 continents, primarily focused on executive and broad-based compensation. I launched my career in the US, working for Hay Group, and then had an opportunity to move to Mercer Middle East. And then more recently, I've had a variety of HR and total reward roles across the Middle East and Europe. So I'm excited to be here today.
Okay, excellent. So I'm sure you're going to have some really good insights and perspectives on the topic of retention. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to fire a question at you and you're going to talk around that question in terms of your thinking. Okay. So the first question that I've got for you is, do you see employee retention as a bigger problem now than pre-COVID?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think retention now is one of the biggest challenges organizations face today. And there's a few reasons why it's even greater than before. The first is like every company is slowly becoming kind of a tech company and slowly navigating away from some of the legacy ways that things have been done in the past. So there's a great demand for kind of new talent, number one. Number two, if you also look at the kind of the economy, over the last like 10 years, for the large part, excluding maybe a period of COVID, the economy has experienced a significant amount of expansion and growth. And then if you think about that also from a talent perspective, there's a high demand and a low supply of available kind of skills and resources out there. And I think that the combination of those factors has really created greater demand for talent than before. And I think COVID has really changed the way people think about work. There's a really important focus today in terms of not just like how people are paid, but what they experience when they go to work. So retention is a huge issue for organizations today, but that also creates huge opportunities for people in the market looking for new opportunities.
Okay, so we've said it's a bit of an issue, but could we see it as an opportunity for employers as opposed to an issue or a problem?
Yeah, I think it could become an opportunity for employers if your, I guess, poorly performing talent is leaving the organization. But what I have experienced is generally organizations are losing some of their kind of top talent, and that becomes a greater issue for the organization. That being said, I think it's a massive opportunity for employees today to move to a new company that, potentially where they better identify with some of their values, some of their culture, while also, receiving a competitive compensation package.
Okay, so putting on your advisory consulting hat now for the next question, what are you seeing as the most effective schemes currently in action that are helping to sort of mitigate the effects of retention?
Sure. So I think, at the end of the day, cash is still king. Employees are looking for very, very competitive compensation packages. So ensuring that the packages that are being offered by organizations today are aligned with the market, number one. From just a pure kind of fixed salary perspective, but also looking at ways that organizations can potentially retain people, and that would be through some maybe long-term incentives, and those are becoming increasingly more prevalent in the Middle East. But then beyond kind of just the compensation elements, I think organizations are really trying to double down on their culture and really trying to become a great place to work. While also looking at some of the benefits that they're offering today to employees in order to attract and retain them. So the main benefits that I'm seeing today are flexible working. Most organizations are going some degree of hybrid today. I think that will be important to attracting and retaining talent. The other aspect is a number of organizations today are looking at improving their medical benefits. typically like medical is one of those things that you don't really like value until you actually like need to use. And I think what happened during COVID is that it impacted everyone, right? People, whether you were young, old, everyone was impacted by this. So, and it brought greater attention and focus to some of these medical benefits. So I'd say focusing on culture, focusing on comp, and then focusing on some of these kind of benefit offerings can really help organizations to both attract new talent, but also retain existing talent.
Okay, some useful insight there. So if somebody's watching now that is working within a business and is concerned that retention is a problem, but they haven't yet given it that much thought or activity, what would you give as some advice as a starting point for what they could do? Because you've given a lot of different potential solutions of how they could go about looking at an issue of retention, but what would be your main advice around how they could move forwards now?
Sure. So the approach that I would take is really trying to understand what the baseline is. And the way that you would understand the baseline is by looking at what is your attrition rate within your organization and how does that compare with other organizations that you potentially benchmark yourself against? Number one. So is attrition actually an issue within your organization? Some degree of attrition is obviously healthy, but if you have a high degree of attrition that exceeds typical benchmarks, then you're really going to want to take a deep dive into some of the reasons that people are leaving your organization. So the first thing that you can do is probably go on Glassdoor and look at what people are saying in terms of the negative insights, and those really create great opportunities for improvement. The second thing is to really take a deep dive into the exit surveys that are being conducted when an employee leaves. In my experience, and there's a figure around this, I think when people leave an organization, approximately 75% of them are leaving because of a poor manager. So, taking a dive into, how can we improve the organization to better retain people? But then third, really looking at some of the policies in place that really support flexible working, that support diversity and inclusion, that support high performance organizations. I think if you can take that approach, you'll have a lot of actionable insights that will potentially help to support the attraction and retention of talent.
That's really good. I liked how you broke that down. Think that it might be beneficial for our followers to actually be able to see that as well after this too, in terms of some action points that they could be using to support them within the business. I've got to the end of the questions that I had for you. The intention was this was a good snapshot, a good insight. Hopefully rev some people up to make some actionable change as well for the better. So thank you, Peter. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it. Look, I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out if you have any specific questions about this or compensation and benefits in general. Happy to support the Emirates HR community.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Peter. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.